On today's episode, Lucas Reichel is back, baby, while Hawks prospects Frank Nazar, Aidan Thompson, and Ryan Greene are frozen for bound.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome on into another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and give me a follow on X at Jack Bushman2, or you can also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And just a quick reminder, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff is 100% free and will help me out tremendously in growing the show. If you're a regular audio listener of the podcast, make sure that you're downloading all of those latest episodes. You can rate and review the show as well. And I also got to let you know, today's episode is brought to you by the Sleeper app, the go-to platform for daily fantasy sports. And right now, if you use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps, then you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit with Sleeper. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Hope everyone's weekend treated them wonderfully. It was actually a marvelous weekend of sports, right? We had the NCAA March Madness tournament. There was also some great college hockey going on. I don't know how many other people out there are as interested in golf as I am, but there was a phenomenal tournament going down in Houston, Major League Baseball. And oh yeah, we also got to see our Chicago Blackhawks play a little bit of spoiler and to the Washington Capitals, the Detroit Red Wings, and the New York Islanders and all their fans out there. You're welcome, because the Blackhawks marched into Wells Fargo Center over the weekend, a place that they had only won one single time since 1996, aside from the 2010 Stanley Cup Final. And they handed the Philadephia Flyers a pretty embarrassing 5-1 beatdown for their fourth consecutive loss. And this is not the time of the year that you want to be doing that. And the Flyers really can't afford to be doing that at this point. And because of this loss, they have now been bumped from that third and final divisional spot in the Metropolitan, and they hold the final wild card position with just 2 points of an edge over the Detroit Red Wings and a 5-point edge over the New York Islanders. The Capitals have slid into that third spot, and oh yeah, there's only 7 games left on the season on the schedule for the Philadephia Flyers, while the Detroit Red Wings have played 1 fewer game than them, and the New York Islanders have played 2 fewer games. So a really bad loss for the Flyers on home ice against a team that they really have dominated in their own building over the last 30 years, but the Blackhawks kind of took it to them from start to finish. And the main reason why they were able to do that, it's been a huge talking point here on the show. So, I'm going to bring it up here again. It's because of what they did in the first period. Came out of the gate ready to play, just like they did earlier on last week in their 3-1 victory over the Calgary Flames. Unfortunately, they weren't able to carry that momentum into Ottawa and do the same thing in that matchup against the Senators. They dug themselves an early hole. The offense was never able to get going. It wound up being their fourth shutout loss of the month and a league-high 12th shutout loss of the entire season. But in this one against the Flyers, the Blackhawks were ready to go. Not only did they score the opening 2 goals of the game, but they held a 10-7 advantage in shots on goal. They just were the team that had the better energy, was doing more and creating more dangerous looks with the puck, and that allowed them to go into the second period and not have to play perfect hockey. And it's been a real struggle for this team to string together, a good 60 minutes. But by putting together a good start and having a good opening 20 that allowed them to go and be a little bit shaky in the second, they give up a goal 17 seconds in, which, was a little bit scary there. It was like, uh-oh, are the wheels about to fall off this thing completely? But they kind of calmed and settled things down there a little bit and wound up evening up the score to give themselves a 2-goal advantage going into the third. And what I loved about their effort in the final 20 minutes was they just didn't stop. They kept on going. They kept being the aggressor, and it felt like they may have recognized that they were playing against a very down Philadelphia Flyers team, an opponent that maybe had kind of already accepted victory and wasn't truly going to be fighting back to all of their capabilities. And the Blackhawks stepped on them in those final 10 to 15 minutes and added insult to injury, a pair of late goals to really seal the deal. And the Blackhawks go and pick up a massive road victory in Philadelphia, just their 7th road win of the entire season, wrapping up the month of March on a very high note. Undoubtedly one of the Blackhawks' best months of the season, probably their best month of the entire year. They go 7-7-0 in 14 games. How about that? Tying a nice little bow on the end of March with a 5-1 road win over the Philadelphia Flyers, and lots of good takeaways out of this one. Number one, though, has to be Lukas Reichel, baby. Finally bursting onto the stat sheet. We had kind of seen it trending in this direction ever since he had been recalled from Rockford, but he really put it together in this game against the Flyers. He had that wraparound goal to kick off the scoring for the Hawks. That was his first goal since December 19th, just his 4th goal of the entire season. And then also went on to pick up a really nice primary assist on Joey Anderson's insurance goal there in the 3rd period, getting the puck out of the defensive zone and putting it into a position in the neutral zone that would allow for Joey Anderson to go and win a battle to create a breakaway for himself. He did just that. It stemmed from Lukas Reichel making a nice play out of his own end. Anderson makes the play in transition and then ends up potting a nice goal there. And for Reichel, it was his first multi-point effort of the entire season. So had to feel good for Lukas. It's been a very frustrating season altogether. But like I said, since he's been recalled from Rockford and had that short stint down there, he seems like he's been locked and loaded. He's been dialed in and focused, and the effort level has been there on a consistent basis thus far. He's brought his A game night in and night out, even when the points weren't ending up, the final results weren't leading to, him accruing points on the stat sheet. He finally does it here in this game. Hopefully it's just foreshadowing a couple of other strong performances out of Lukas Reichel to wrap up this campaign on a high note. And then the man I just mentioned, Joey Anderson, this guy just keeps taking advantage of his opportunities, keeps continuing to play hard and playing honest, just really playing the right way. And it feels like Luke Richardson really respects that and also clearly trusts Joey Anderson in the defensive side of things. I mean, with Jason Dickinson and Colin Blackwell, they were going up against the opposing team's top line each and every night. So Luke Richardson clearly has that trust in Joey Anderson, and he ended up having one of his better offensive performances of the entire year as well, picking up his 4th goal of the season too, and then threading the needle with a perfect pass to set up Mackenzie Entwistle for the Hawks' 5th goal of the night. Really solid stuff from Joey Anderson, just continuing to add to his case for a potential roster spot in this Blackhawks forward group next season. Also, Philip Kurashev, baby, keeps on racking up points. He showed off his much improved shot that he's really developed this season with his 16th tally of the year, an absolute blistering wrister over the glove of the opposing goaltender in transition. Continues to be a really effective player off the rush and kind of understanding how to play with Connor Bedard and where to go to find the open ice. I thought that goal of his was a perfect example of that and how well he executes along with Connor Bedard in transition. And then he also had a beautiful primary assist to help the Blackhawks regain their 2-goal lead there in the 2nd period. A tic-tac-toe, a tic-tac goal passing play, which ended up on Nick Foligno's tape and into the back of the net. A great little quick passing play out of Philip Kurashev from down below the goal line. And don't look now, but he's up to 49 points in 67 games on the season, 16 goals and 33 assists, 8 games to go. and he's just 11 points shy of 60 on the season. The next point that he accrues will give him number 50 on the year. I really didn't think that was in the cards for Philipp Kurashev this season, so I continue to be just so pleasantly surprised by his offensive development. He really has been awesome, and would love to see him go in pot 60 this year. 60 points, that is, for the Blackhawks, not 60 goals, but hey, maybe we'll get there one day out of Philipp Kurashev. And then I definitely have to give a shout out to Arvid Soderblom in net as well. He did let in a softie, like he does seemingly each and every outing, but that was the only blemish on his record in this one. He ended up stopping 30 of the 31 shots that he faced. That was the second best save percentage that he's had in a game this season. The only one that was better was the second game of the year, his first win against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So it had been a while since we've seen Philipp Kurashev, Arvid Soderblom only allow one goal to go by him. So obviously that's much needed improvement out of him. And quietly, he's now won 3 out of his last 5 games. So it would be nice to see him build off of this and finish off the year a little bit stronger, because just like Lucas Reichel, it has not gone as a whole the way that we have wanted, but he has been a little bit better here in the last couple of weeks. Don't know how many more starts he's going to have out of these final 8 games on the schedule. Probably only 2 or 3, but would be nice to see him mix in another win or 2 before it's all said and done on April 18th when the Hawks wrap up their regular season. All right, there are all of my thoughts from the Blackhawks' impressive 5-1 win over the Philadephia Flyers on Saturday, handing them their 4th consecutive defeat. A real bad time to be doing that for the Flyers and all their fans. Coming up in just a moment here, I'll continue to talk about the Blackhawks prospects like I've been doing on a lot of shows recently, and I'll speak on all of their prospects that are going to be heading to the Final Four, the Frozen Four, excuse me. But first, I need to talk to you all about Sleeper. A new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. Connor Bedard looks like he's on his way to winning the Calder Trophy for NHL Rookie of the Year. Austin Matthews looks like he's on his way to winning the Rocket Richard Trophy for scoring the most goals. And it's still up in the air as to who's going to be winning the President's Trophy for the best team in the NHL in the regular season. But you could be winning alongside all of them that I just mentioned by playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. And Sleeper is the Locked On Podcast Network's #1 choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy contests. All you have to do is simply pick whether studs like Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, or Connor Bedard will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for goals, assists, points, shots, and plus minus and more in any given game. And again, Sleeper gives you the chance to win 100 times your cash. So start paying attention, make the correct picks, and you could be winning real big. And you can also go and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps right there down below to get up to an $100 match on your first deposit with Sleeper. Or even if you just want to deposit $20 or $50, they'll match you on that up to $100. All you got to do is use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps. And if you want, you can go and see Sleeper's terms of use right now for more details. Segment 2. I've been talking a lot about Blackhawks prospects here on the show lately, and over the weekend, of course, was the regional finals of the NCAA tournament on both Saturday and Sunday to determine who is going to be heading to the Frozen Four, not the Final Four. Of course, that just got determined on Sunday night as well. Congratulations to DJ Burns and the NC State Wolfpack, who are going to be taking on, who are they going to be facing? They're going to be facing Zach Edey and Purdue in the Final Four. But we're going to get back to talking about the Frozen Four here, because we got to see who's going to be heading to Minnesota in a couple of weeks' time over the weekend. And Blackhawks prospects left and right were playing in some meaningful games on both Saturday and Sunday. Starting things off, Frank Nazar and the Michigan Wolverines. Well, I guess I'm going in reverse order here. Most recently on Sunday, Frank Nazar and the Michigan Wolverines took on Artem Levshunov and the Michigan State Spartans in a Big Ten championship rematch. We also got to see Aidan Thompson and the Denver Pioneers take on Cornell. And then, of course, a massive, colossal battle between Greene Macklin Celebrini and Boston University, and Oliver Moore, Sam Renzel, and the Minnesota Golden Gophers. But starting off with first the Big Ten championship game rematch, the Michigan State Spartans ended up winning that game a few weeks ago to claim the Big Ten title. But the Michigan Wolverines struck for their revenge here this weekend. And what a back and forth game this was. I was trying to keep up with it as much as I could. Easter Sunday, you got some family obligations to do. I'm also covering a golf tournament. That's neither here nor there, but also this game was fantastic. Every time I was getting an update, it was back and forth, back and forth. Michigan State was able to tie things up 2-2 in the third period, but then Michigan responded in a big way with 2 goals in a 12-second span. One of them was scored by Gavin Brindley with an absolutely bananas setup by Frank the Tank Nazar. If you haven't gone and seen it yet, just go and give Frank Nazar a Google. It was a wicked between the legs pass for a primary assist to basically seal the deal for Michigan. They wind up adding an empty netter and winning this one 5-2, but that's a perfect little sample of just the type of swagger that Frank Nazar plays with out there and the type of creative mind and skill set that he has. And oh yeah, he's a pretty solid defensive two-way center at the same point in time. So Michigan punches their ticket into the Frozen Four. They're going to be having a big-time battle and going to try to slay the dragon known as Boston College on April 11th, a couple of weeks from now in St. Paul, Minnesota. It is going to be a big-time battle to kick off the Frozen Four. The only downside of Michigan making it this far as we're still a couple of weeks away from Frank Nazar's decision. And quite honestly, I don't even know if there's going to be enough time for him to play for the Blackhawks at the end of the season because, like I said, they're going to be taking on Boston College on April 11th. Now, if they make it to the national championship game, that's going to be April 13th. That point in time, the Blackhawks would only have 2 games left in the regular season. They wrap things up, like I said, at the end of segment 1. I did that on purpose for a little bit of a teaser there on April 18th. So if Michigan goes and wins the national championship game, there's really only 2 potential games for Frank Nazar to play in. It could be a little bit of a quick turnaround for him. I just don't know if that's really going to be happening. Even if they don't win the championship, there's not that much time. So I don't know if we're going to be seeing Frank Nazar, sadly, rocking the Blackhawks sweater before the end of the year, but this is only going to lead into the buildup growing in terms of what his decision is going to be. I know a lot of Blackhawks fans out there are very antsy to know whether or not Frank is going to be taking his talents to the professional scene or if he's going to be returning to Michigan for his junior campaign. I do wonder if the results of the Frozen Four are going to play any part in that. And from what it sounds like, according to Scott Powers of The Athletic, unlike some of the other prospects, it feels like the ball is kind of in Frank Nazar's court here. Like if he wants to go back to Michigan, it sounds like the Blackhawks are going to allow him to do that. I'm sure they would probably want him to go pro at this point in time, but it seems like they're going to allow him to kind of pick what he wants to do. So unfortunately, we're going to have to wait a couple of more weeks before we get that answer out of Frank Nazar, but wishing him the best in a colossal battle against a really good Boston College team led by 3 first-round picks from last year's draft, Will Smith, Ryan Leonard, and who am I completely forgetting? Oh, Gabe Perreault. Yeah, very good player as well, Doy. Also, over the weekend, we got to see Aidan Thompson, second line, third line center, bounced a little bit up and down this year for the Pioneers. They were taking on the Cornell Big Red, one of the best defensive teams in the entire country. And Cornell actually struck early in this one to grab a 1-0 lead. But that's all the offense they wound up mustering up as the Pioneers responded to tie the game 1-1 late in the first period. And then with under 5 seconds left in the second, they got one in to take a 2-1 advantage going into the third. And that wound up being all the offense that was needed as Matt Davis just continues to play incredible goaltending for them. He was phenomenal all throughout that double overtime game that they ended up winning. And there was even a point in that game where it looked like he was injured and was going to potentially have to leave early. He powers through. They go on to win that game, and they win another close one in large part due to the way that he's been playing in net 2-1. So Aidan Thompson and the Pioneers are going back to the Frozen Four. Of course, they were the national champions there a couple of seasons ago, led by captain and now Rockford Ice Hog stud Cole Gutman. Hopefully he'll be able to do what he's doing for Rockford right now with the Blackhawks next year, and will be able to carry off of that momentum. And then that takes us to the matchup of matchups. Minnesota versus Boston University, Sam Rinzel and Oliver Moore versus Ryan Greene and Macklin Celebrini, the kid who is going to be going number 1 overall in the 2024 NHL draft. And we got ourselves an offensive shootout in this one. 9 goals total scored between the two sides, but ultimately it was the Terriers offense who ended up leading the way. Macklin Celebrini didn't score a goal, shockingly. He had 32 in 36 games entering this one, but he still made his mark on the game. He still left his lasting impression with 3 assists. No points for Ryan Greene, while the Terriers did score 6 goals, and Oliver Moore wound up pointless on the other side for Minnesota. Sam Rinzel picked up a secondary assist early on in this game, but sadly, their season is going to come to an end as they fall 6-3 to BU on Saturday night. Boston University going back to the Frozen Four. I was leaning that way in this matchup. And they're going to be meeting up with Aidan Thompson in the Denver Pioneers also on April 11th. In a couple of weeks' time, so that makes 3 Blackhawks prospects to be on the lookout for in the Frozen Four, which is, yes, unfortunately, 11 days from now. There is a huge pause before those final 3 games. But 3 Blackhawks prospects are going to be taking part in the Frozen Four this year. Frank Nazar playing for the Michigan Wolverines, Aidan Thompson playing for the Denver Pioneers, and Ryan Greene playing for the Boston University Terriers. Maybe number 4 if we can keep our fingers crossed and get lucky in the draft lottery again and get that Macklin Celebrini guy to come and play with Connor Bedard for a long, long time here in Chicago. All right, there is everything you need to know regarding Blackhawks prospects ahead of the Frozen Four. Coming up in just a moment here before I wrap things up on today's show. Still got to get into my weekly Mailbag Monday fan segment. But first, I got to talk to you all about FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game of the NCAA tournament, whether you're betting on a big upset or betting on one of the big favorites or even who is going to be winning the national championship game. It's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook because right now, new customers can get $200 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's all you got to do. You'll get $200 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And you can use these bonuses to bet on everything from point spreads to money lines, live bets, player props, same game parlays. You can even pick on who's going to win the national championship game. Go and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets once again at FanDuel, and make sure to go and check out FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $200 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, please make sure to go and smash that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. If you really like what you're watching on a daily basis or what you're listening to, please go and tell a friend, go and tell a family member. If you know someone who really loves the Chicago Blackhawks, please go and refer the show. I would greatly appreciate that. And also, make sure to go and check out the new Locked On Sports Today, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts from Locked On. Plus, our national shows covering every single league. So make sure to go and check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Segment 3, still got to get into our weekly Mailbag Monday fan segment before I wrap things up here on today's show. And real quick, please, If you have a question, if you're thinking to yourself right now, oh, darn, I really want Jack to answer this question, make sure to go and hit that comment section down below right now, or you can reach out and slide into any one of my DMs on my social media accounts. You can email lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com, or you can even check out the community tab on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. I really enjoy this segment, like I say, week in and week out, but it's only possible if you all reach out with your questions. So please make sure to go and do that real quick, and I'll be sure to answer them right here on this show this time next week. The first question I wanted to get into here comes from Isaac Guerrero on YouTube, who asked, if the Blackhawks season ends before the Ice Hogs season, can Wyatt Kaiser or Lukas Reichel return to the Ice Hogs to help them in a playoff run? Yes, and I wanted to be sure to outline this because it can be a little bit of a confusing concept. Who can go down to Rockford and play in the Calder Cup playoffs and who can't? Are the Blackhawks able to send any of their guys that they want to? No, there's only a select number of them that can, and they need to be officially sent down to Rockford via a paper transaction before the trade deadline goes down to make them eligible. That was what the Blackhawks did with Isaac Phillips, Louis Crevier. We also saw that with Lukas Reichel. Rem Pitlick went down earlier on in the season. Wyatt Kaiser is someone who's going to be eligible to play down there. So yes, I think those are the only guys who are currently up with the Blackhawks that would be eligible to do so. I don't even think like a healthy Reese Johnson would. I'm pretty sure that's it. Landon Slaggert isn't able to. I don't believe so. I think that's really it in terms of who's on the Blackhawks roster now. Just Lukas Reichel and Wyatt Kaiser. But yes, that is a thing. At the time, Isaac Phillips and Louis Crevier were getting NHL minutes. That's actually when they were both sent down. We assumed it was going to be a paper transaction, but that was actually when Jarrett Tenorti was able to return. So neither of them have been back up in the NHL ever since, I don't believe. But yes, both Wyatt Kaiser, both Lukas Reichel are eligible, and I quite honestly believe they're both going to be playing for the Rockford Ice Hogs in the Calder Cup playoffs. Going to make that team even stronger than they are right now, and they are absolutely rolling after another big win over the Chicago Wolves this weekend. Interested to see though about Reichel. I feel like they're gonna send him down. He was still there when they got on the start of this run. Obviously, it's going to give them a huge dynamic playmaker that's going to help out their offense big time. I just do wonder if they're concerned about vibing with the mojo that they have going at this point in time. But I assume both of them are going to be playing for Rockford in the Calder Cup playoffs just a couple of weeks from now. At Michael 324-80854, most underrated Hawks prospect. Good question. I feel like Ryan Greene probably doesn't get as much buzz as he probably should. He has been an absolute stud for Boston University. He was a stud for them as a freshman last year, and he would have been their top line center this year if it wasn't for that darn Macklin Celebrini guy. But even in their second line center role, very responsible two-way type of player, a point per game guy. The goal scoring went up. He was part of their top power play unit in that bumper spot. And it feels like he knows where to go to score goals. He goes to the gritty areas. He's got some size to him, a pretty decent skater. I feel like Ryan Greene is a little bit under the radar. I'm super excited for him. I feel like Gavin Hayes probably doesn't get as much steam, a guy who got traded to Sioux from Flint this year and just absolutely lit it up, could not stop scoring goals. Those are probably the first two that come to mind immediately. I'm trying to think of maybe some later round guys. Aidan Thompson was always someone who I thought was super underrated, but he's had a honestly an underwhelming sophomore campaign despite the Pioneers going back to the Frozen Four. After what he did in his first year with that team last season, I thought he was on the cusp of a really big breakout year this year, and that just didn't really happen for him offensively. Samuel Savoie, I think, is a sneaky good prospect as well. Like, I think he has enough grit, enough tenacity, and just enough of that it factor. Like, I just really do think he's going to be a guy. I think he's going to find his way to the NHL level. So those are kind of the guys that come to my mind right off the rip. From Ken T, who emailed in the podcast over the weekend, he asked, which Ice Hogs should I watch during the playoffs? And this is actually an easy question for me to answer because My father just attended the Ice Hogs Chicago Wolves game yesterday, and he was asking me which guys on the Ice Hogs should I be paying attention to. The first one I said, though, was number 70, Cole Gutman, who has been on an absolute tear recently. Another 3-point game for him last night now gives him 20 points in his last, maybe 19 points in his last 10 games, 7 multi-point performances in his last 10. He has been a madman for the Rockford Ice Hogs. If Lucas Reichel goes back there, obviously he's someone to watch. Same with Wyatt Kaiser on the back end. And both Ethan Del Mastro and Nolan Allen are two guys definitely that I'd be having circled anytime I'm watching the Ice Hogs. Two guys who look like they could be pieces of the puzzle on the back end in the future for the Blackhawks. And then I'll wrap things up by saying Drew Comesso in net, because he could be the goalie of the future for Chicago. I expect him to spend the full year again with Rockford next season, but that's okay. That's all part of the plan, and I really do think he has the goods, and I've thought for a while that he has the goods to be the guy, the head honcho in net for the Blackhawks one day down the road. So those are the guys in particular that I'd be having circled during any Ice Hogs game, Ken. Next question comes from Will Nelson. I don't know if this is actually your name, Will. If not, pretty cool moniker there. He asked, Bedard or Foligno next captain? I actually haven't heard this question in a while, and I'm kind of surprised by it. I just don't know if they're going to give Nick Foligno the actual C when he's realistically only going to be here another 2 years, which is a good chunk of time. And honestly, whether he wears the C or not, he's going to be the captain for the Blackhawks as long as he's here, right? It's really going to be his dressing room. He's going to be the leader everyone's going to follow. I find it a little bit hard pressed that the Blackhawks are actually going to put the C on him. With this being just such a storied franchise and Jonathan Toews obviously being the last guy to do it, I just really think it's going to be Connor Bedard is going to be the next guy to have that C on his chest. But like I said, Nick Foligno is going to be the captain. He's going to be the guy mentoring Bedard for that role. And who better to have Connor Bedard mentoring him than Nick Foligno, a veteran guy with so much respect, who's been there, done that, and has just been a great addition for several different reasons for the Chicago Blackhawks team. Worth every penny, even though some are going to say it's an overpay for these next 2 years. It doesn't matter. He really is going to be priceless in a very integral next couple of seasons for the Blackhawks to head in the direction they want to. So whether Foligno has the C or not, don't get it twisted. He's the guy, but I really do think Bedsy's going to be the next one with the C. Next question comes from @DizzyD22277, who asked, do you think Bedard is hurt because he's passing up plays he's normally making and hasn't looked the same in the last 3 or 4 games? I do agree that I think before the game against Philadelphia that Connor Bedard was a little bit quieter than he had been in the couple of weeks in the past since returning from that injury, but those things happen. I mean, he's still finding ways to put up points very, very close to that point per game margin here as a rookie. The goal scoring has definitely dropped off a little bit, but the shooting is still there, right? Like he's still getting off shot attempts. The creativity, the playmaking has been there. It's just a little bit of a goal scoring skid for him. But honestly, knowing the way that he is and the way that he goes out there, sometimes with that extra chip on his shoulder because he hasn't scored in a while, I have a feeling the next time he scores one, it's probably going to be a 2-goal game for Bedsy. Next question comes from @DaleQ, who asked, any idea if the Hawks are close to the record of getting shut out in a season? Washington's first year has to be up there. I actually looked this up. The 2006-2007 Columbus Blue Jackets were shut out 20 times. That is an NHL record in terms of modern day NHL with an 82-game schedule. The Blackhawks have been blanked 12 times this year, which, yeah, is still a ton. It still leads the NHL, but a good chunk away from the NHL record. The Blue Jackets, that must have been tough. I think that was their first season in the NHL, I believe, getting blanked 20 times. That's before the expansion draft actually allowed you the opportunity to go and be a successful team in your first year. So as bad as the Hawks have been, just know it could always be worse. Last question comes from @APelly50 on X, who asked, re-sign Jackson Stauber? Yeah, I think the Blackhawks absolutely have to. I think it would be smart to bring him back and give Arvid Soderblom a little bit of competition going into next season. I think Jackson Stauber, it wasn't a big stint in the NHL last season, but he looked pretty good for 5 or 6 games and has put together much better numbers than he did in Rockford last year. He's an RFA. I would be bringing him back. I would be kind of surprised, honestly, if the Blackhawks don't. I just think that competition would be good for Arvid Soderblom and know that there's someone on his heels. And if he doesn't play well, if he doesn't have a good training camp, could be back down to Rockford for him. And honestly, that could even be the end of his career, considering in the NHL, at least considering the way things have gone this season. He really needs to take advantage of that opportunity that he has here with the Blackhawks, because I don't know how many other teams are going to be willing to give him a contract extension if things don't get better. If he ever does hit the open market following the conclusion of next season. So I personally am in favor of re-signing Jackson Sauber. I think he's done enough. And also could be a real good tandem, again, comfortable tandem for him and Drew Commesso in Rockford if he ends up back there and not in the NHL as the backup behind Peter Mrazek. All right, that is going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for tuning into the show, and be sure to go and subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel and to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and that way you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and give me a follow on X at JackBushman2. And make sure to go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account as well at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.